All right. Well, it's 12:30 on the dot, Jimmy. So I think we're going to get started. I want to welcome everyone. Our conference has been going very well for the situation that we have. I appreciate, let me just take a quick look here. My list says we have 431 people have registered and are attending our event. So we're very thankful for everyone that's attending and everyone that wants to learn more about soil health. And we have been working toward getting Jimmy Emmons up to South Dakota to do our conference for a couple of years. Dennis Hoyle, our former chairman of the coalition, was a good friend of Jimmy's and had been at some different events and really wanted to work to get Jimmy up. So I will briefly do Jimmy Emmons and his wife and family own and manage about 2,000 acres of cropland and about 5,000 or so acres of rangeland in Dewey County, Oklahoma area, which he has been farmed and ranged for over a century. Located in that semi-arid Great Plains, conditions can be challenging with low levels of rainfall, wildfires, and drought as potential challenges to overcome. The farm was converted to no-till in 1995, and Jimmy later continued his soil health journey by adopting diverse crop rotations, utilizing cover crops, and incorporating planned grazing management to decrease his soil erosion and increase his water infiltration. The Emmons utilize a diverse rotation of wheat, canola, rye, sunflowers, peas, soybeans, milo, sesame, and alfalfa to mitigate the risk of fluctuating markets and weather, while at the same time building soil health. They commonly plant cover crop mixes consisting of over 10 species and make it a priority to incorporate livestock onto the production cropland. And without any more, I will turn it over to Jimmy. Welcome, Jimmy. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cindy, and thanks to the coalition for the invitation up today, whether it be virtual or being there in person. Nowadays we just have to do what we have to do. But very honored to have the invitation to share a little bit about Emmons Farms and what we've been able to discover here in Oklahoma. Much like South Dakota, we're about in the same rainfall weather pattern that y'all are in, whether it be, I'm in about a 20-inch rainfall, give or take 20 inches, I tell everybody. In 2011, we had 9 inches, in 12, we had 7.3, and then in 14, we had 25.9 the month of May. So, give or take 20-some inches is what I say. So today I'm going to share a little bit about our farm. My wife Ginger and I operate this farm that my granddad came, and my great granddad brought him here in the 20s and started the family farm. I have one full-time employee, Carson Leibold. He's been with me about 13 years now. So I am a recovering tillage addict. Everybody asks, what that is? Well, it's exactly what it says. I grew up with my granddad and my dad farming, and we were very heavy tillage. Probably 2 to possibly 3 crops is all we ever had. We had wheat, cotton, and some alfalfa in the bottomland. This particular picture behind the name there is about 50 miles from my house, and this was 2 years ago. This was a wheat field that was planted in winter wheat, heavy tillage, and it looks like the 1930s. So a recovering tillage addict, I had to change my mindset and try to evaluate where we're at. And Dr. Dwayne Beck started helping me in 1995, see the light, and we've came a long way since then. Good people can make harmful or bad decisions if the systems which they are making those decisions is properly or poorly designed. Now, I realize that these firemen never intended for this lady to jump out of one fire into the other, but you have to manage a system. You've got to make good decisions, but it's got to be designed properly. You can't go into something that's very poor. So it's something to think about. So as we started trying to evaluate where we were at and the methods that we were using on Emmons Farms, we wanted to try to evaluate where we were at and where we wanted to go. And so we wanted to look at nature. That's a very good story of what you can grow in your area. You just need to look around and see what plants are growing, what if you have any native rangeland around, what species is there, will pretty well tell you what you can grow in your cropland. Of course, we were tilling at the time when we started this transition back in 2008 and on forward. We were doing some no-till on my land. My folks were still heavy into tillage at that point in time, and was looking at it, but it was still the old rut syndrome that they wanted to till. And then I lost my dad about 25 years ago, and we went into complete no-till. Then this thing with cover crops came along, and how could we grow cover crops if we couldn't grow but one crop a year? And water was a big concern of mine early on, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But then livestock, as Cindy said, we ranched quite a bit too, so we had animals, but we very seldom had them on our production land. Only on some cool season winter wheat did we graze. We never grazed in the summertime before we started looking at this. So we looked at nature, and nature has this beautiful ability to grow up, fall down, and recycle, and nothing's never hauled off in a true nature system. And so that's where cover crops come in, is that we can replace that haul off of nutrients and carbon and everything else with cover crops. So we want to look at nature's method. There's no mechanical disturbance. There's armor on the soil surface at all time. It cycles water at a very good rate. It's very diverse, lots of living roots and networks, diverse animal life. The nutrient cycling and the biology is just alive. There's thousands of years of research and development. It's very dynamic and very complex. The creator, he designed this system that's very self-sustaining. It's interconnected. It's very regenerative, and it's functioning. And we have come along and disturbed all that and made it not functioning very well. But can we mimic Mother Nature? Yes, we can. We really can. And I've been challenged by that with some professors and some academia that says you can't mimic nature. Well, mimic is the word. It's not duplicate. So, I can mimic being John Wayne, but am I John Wayne? No, not even close. But you can mimic something, and that's the way that we've tried to look at this is, we can do this. If you look at these two different pictures, one's the moon and one is the way that we used to do it, keeping it very clean. Is there really any difference here? Yeah. The absence of life. The only thing that was alive there on the left was where someone walked on it, and someone walked on the moon, but there's no life. That's the thing that we got to realize about monocropping and heavy tillage. We destroy the biology below our feet, and there's more of them than there are of us. And the thing that we got to remember about the biological world is they are just like us. They breathe in oxygen, they emit CO2 and water vapor out. They're a living entity. Their lifespan is just shorter than ours, but there is an abundance of life if we allow the system to function. So if we're going to look at the till method here, tillage increases the availability of food for the biology, but it increasing the respiration, but it's depleting soil organic matter and causing the CO2 to go up in the atmosphere. When you smell that fresh plowed ground, you're smelling the carbon gassing off and moving up into the atmosphere. And we all used to think how beautiful that smelled. Well, you can do the same thing now with a shovel and just dig up just a small bit, and you can smell that on our place in a very rich carbon atmosphere. But it also takes increased fuel, time, and labor. When I grew up with my folks, it was very common for us to put 1,000 hours apiece on a tractor. So we ran about 3,000 hours a year just on the tractors alone, tilling. But if you look at this system, it's very dependent on high inputs, and that's something that we have to reduce to be profitable. So we'll look at pros to tilling. I can't see any. The cons, there's less C for the microbes. The color of the soil will lighten, and I'll show you the difference in that pretty soon. It destroys the biological atmosphere. The structure increases weed pressure, disease. As Dale Strickler said earlier today, our infiltration rates went to nothing when we started that. We had increased erosion, and man, it was dependent on inputs. So no-till method, we want to look, and Dale talked a little bit about this earlier in the program about a fallow period in between. That's what we started with when we started no-tilling. We would have a crop growing, and then we would have a fallow period in between before the next crop. And that fallow period was devastating, even though we were no-tilling and building the atmosphere and building a habitat for the micro activity below the ground and the biological activity. Then we had a period that we didn't feed that. And so we had big peaks and valleys in our biological system. But, it's very diverse. We got to have that in our system. And, it's things that we really need to look at, though, is the no-till with cover crops and livestock. It's very important to have that soil health accelerator in the system. If you remember what I talked about earlier about looking at Mother Nature always had animals in the system. And why is that? Well, she helps that nutrient cycling. It's very fast. Also, if we do this with no-till and covers, we take care of the fallow period here in the middle with a very diverse cover crop system. And we graze that. We had the animals here, so why not give our native range a break and use cover crops, increase our acceleration of our nutrients here. And as Dale talked earlier today, how important animals are to the system. And it is very, very important if you want to have a truly functional system that you have all these components. So if you look at the big circle here, we have a no-till cash plant, a no-till cover crop, or a cash crop, planted. We maintain the cash crop, then we harvest the cash crop. Now we're going to no-till a cover crop in between there. We do that even in an environment that we have here. It's very arid at times. This past summer, it was devastating. We actually had some cover crops that died off quite a bit. It just no rainfall whatsoever, but they still survived. That's one thing about the diversity in the cover crop system. They will survive. A few species may die off in an extreme weather event, but we'll graze them. And as you graze them, that also stimulates that growth. We then allow that to regrow. We'll terminate that. And there's very different ways to terminate, where it be roller crimping. You can use livestock, you can use chemical, just lots of different ways that you can do that. So that really gets an overall soil health that's accelerated and a truly functioning system. So there's this big circle of ongoing life all the time. You've got to remember that herd below the ground, we have to feed that continually. And to do that, we have to have a living root and animals on that at all times. So that's our goal, and that's what we try to do. So as we look at pros, living plant 24/7, we're feeding the microbiology. The soil becomes resilient. So we flatten out that line of big, huge weather swings that we all see, whether it be a drought, a flash flood. They're calling it whiplash weather nowadays. We all see that. It's from one extreme to another. Once we start doing that, though, we have a higher biological population, have increased formulation of soil aggregates. That's very important for our water infiltration rate. We're going to decrease the erosion and runoff. We have less compaction as that mulch and that organic matter gets higher. That compaction becomes a very minimal worry that we have. The benefits of manure and urine, the increase in soil organic matter is huge. It's huge because it's full of nutrients and carbon as well. Less needs for commercial inputs. Integrating livestock adds, extra profitability. We got more pore space to move water down through the profile at a quicker rate. Carbon on the soil, and it does mimic nature. The cons, though, there is cons to everything, and you got to keep it in context. It's very complex. It requires increased management. Back when I tilled and we had 2 crops, I knew exactly the day we were going to plant. I knew what we were going to spend in fertilizer. I knew how many times we'd be going over the ground. I knew when we'd top dress. I knew when we'd harvest. It was just an ongoing vicious cycle of spend money, try to get money back, and then respend it. It does take some more fencing and water infrastructure, logistical issues, biomass management. In the early days, I was worried about having too much biomass. Now I can't have enough. The biology consumes it at a very rapid rate. And so there is some management strategies to that. You need some sacrifice areas because these huge weather event swings that we have, there are times that you need to sacrifice an area, but you don't need to have the same area all the time. You need to have that where you can move it around. It does require faith, patience, understanding, and the commitment. I tell everybody I'm like a Texas poker player. I'm all in. I believe that what we're doing will save our farm, will save for future generations, even after the Emmonses are gone. So I'm all in on what we do. You also got to remember where the animals go, the nutrients flow. 80% of the nutrients consumed go back into the soil, 80%. And I will tell you that if you're putting commercial fertilizer out, you are not being 80% efficient. So animals are very efficient on what they do. They cycle very quickly. So which method? We've looked at all these methods here from nature, no-till, tillage, no-till with cover crops. What one is really going to rejuvenate your soil and make it vibrant like it used to be? Well, we need one that is fungal dominant. We need one that's very diverse. We need lots of diversity. If you look at the native range around you in your atmosphere, whether it's a forest or a rangeland setting, it's very diverse. It will have lots of biomass, and that's all, of course, weather dependent, but there still is biomass out there. That's the way it was designed. But it's also very complex. So we need that in the system too. But we all need benefits. And the benefits are being able to pay the bills. You got to make some money at this to survive, to put food on the table for the family is very, very important. So which one of these scenarios do we need to look at for that? Well, there's 2. There's no-till with cover crops, and there's no-till cover crops with livestock. And for me, it's livestock. It's a complete functioning system, the closest I can get to Mother Nature. If you look around, that's the one that we choose. Making that same decision multiple times without change is just no longer a decision. It becomes a choice. And that's where we were at. We're making the same decision over and over, and we chose that path. And I'm no longer on that path. But you know what I do have? I do have the true deep desire to make the land better. A lot of people will tell you that they want their kids, their future generations to have something that's better for them. Well, land is one of your biggest assets, and you want to build assets instead of deplete assets. So you've really got to have that. And you know, where there's life, there's always hope. And if you see in this cover crop mix here that everything that I've just explained about all the diversity, and it is full of life above ground and below ground. That is so important. As you remember, anything out of this presentation, you know, where there's life, there is hope. So now we're going to move into Emmons Farms. From the tillage days when I was a tillage addict, this is what Emmons Farms used to look like. This was actually a neighbor's tract that we were so-called no-tilling in. He wanted to pull a no-till drill over this. I don't know why, but he paid me to do it. But since them days, we have cut our fuel cost, and this is a 7-year average. I look back from $128,000 to this year. We just closed out our year about $20,000 on the same amount of acres, and we've reduced the chemical fertilizer by about 85%, and in that chemicals as well. We're on the road trying to get to zero. I don't know when we'll get to zero. We're getting closer every year as the biological activity picks up, and we're getting closer. So in my area, if you want to look at Emmons Farms versus my neighbors, then you need to look at this. There's two very different styles of farming. And we're going to take a typical wheat scenario, winter wheat here with a tillage system. You know, most guys around here will pull a deep tillage first. And all these costs I got from OSU University from their custom applications chart. So it's kind of a fair comparison. Then a lot of them disc to mulch that straw to try to get rid of that residue. Then they'll follow up with a chisel with sweeps to get rid of the weeds because they took care of all the residue. Then they've got to field cultivate that to get it settled back down in time to put out more money in fertilizer. And then they'll field cultivate again and plant. They'll put top dress fertilizer on. And when that's all said and done, they've spent about $125 an acre. And that, you know, all the equipment wear and tear and upkeep is in that. And that's very expensive. Now, if you want to look at Emmons Farms, you know, once we harvest a crop, if we have any weed pressure or anything that we need to burn down, that's an option. A lot of times we graze that and we don't use that, but I want to be very fair in this comparison. So I put that in there. We'll no-till a cover crop right directly into that stubble. We have our seed cost of a 15 to 20 weight blend. We normally try to stay around $18 to $20 of seed in that. You know, terminate the cover crop. I put $10 down there, whether that be a rolling or that be spraying or whatnot. That's a pretty accurate number in there. We'll plant and we'll use some fertilizer with humic acid in that. Now we're doing a biostimulant on them seeds. And when we top dressed, we figured $20 in there. These were in the early years. That's kind of lessened up, but for fair comparisons here, I want to be fair. You know, so our cost is $104 an acre, so we're $20 cheaper. But we grazed that cover crop and we regained $85 of that on animals. So the final cost per acre is only $19. So there's your comparison of how I can be more profitable than the neighbors. You look at Russell Hedrick in North Carolina. Russell does similar things that I do. We're very good friends. He put this up for me, and I'm sharing this slide. His total savings was $91,000 for the year. So once again, if you listen to Dale earlier, the more cover you have, the less weed pressure you have. So the less weed pressure you have, the less money you got to spend on herbicides to try to control them weeds. The best weed control you have is a seed. You get that cover down there, that goes away. So the journey begins here. This was our very first cover crop. Now remember, a tillage addict is much like a drug addict or an alcoholic. If you want to cure yourself, you have to take away the temptation. The first cover crop I grew here was probably about 7 foot tall. I was going to go into a winter canola crop. I panicked. I grabbed the vertical tillage tool. I made a few passes out here that you see, and it just hit me like, Jimmy, what in the world are you doing? You say you're all in, and what you do, you took the temptation. And while I was doing that, I looked behind and, man, this looks good. I've got lots of residue here in the ground. I'm going to have a good seed planting into this. And then the Lord just told me to stop. Good grief, Jimmy, pay attention here. And so we quit and we left strips. And when we went to harvest that winter wheat, you know what we found? There was no, and I want to repeat, no difference in yield. So what have I done? It's just like a huge anvil come out of the sky and hit me in the head when I saw these results. Is I spent about $80,000 on a vertical tillage, pulled it with a $200,000 tractor. For what? Nothing. And as soon as I realized this, I traded that off, got me a big air seeder, and I'm never, ever tilling again. And I took that temptation away. I have no tillage tools except one small little disc and hair for feral pigs. They tend to want to till for me sometimes, and they do not smooth up afterwards. So once in a while, we have to do a little bit of maintenance. So as we looked in the future here, we started leaving check strips. And if I can get this to advance. Okay, here we go. Cover crops on the right, no cover crops on the left. This was down the same drill furrow. We divided, in the early days, we divided the field in half to get a true representation. Cover crops on the right, no cover crops in between on the left. Look at the difference in the roots in these. And also, if you'll notice here, that there is no soil sticking to the roots, no rhizal sheeting. This was in the early days. Jay Fuhr, a good friend of mine, came down, helped me dig this up back in 2010. And if you look at these two different samples here, look at the difference in the root mass, but also look at the difference now in the soil is starting to change already 3 years in, the darkness on the right versus on the left. Then here we are in 2020. Now the rhizal sheeting is starting to take place. The biological world is coming alive. These roots are putting off exudates that's feeding that biology, and the soil is sticking right to it. And that's what we want to see. It's very, very important. We want armor on the ground, even in our winter wheat, so that compaction goes away. But we also want to be able to take them big rains and big snowstorms when they come and keep them in the field. We want to retain every drop of water where it falls. So early on, we were very worried about water use of the cover crops. And some of the first things that we pulled was cores, where we left ground bare, simulating what the neighbors would do. And lo and behold, no cover on the left, cover on the right. My gosh, we had a lot more water. And that was really unexpected from Jimmy in the early days. And I knew right then that we were on to something. And every time I've pulled tests like this, NRCS pulled these cores, we weighed them and dried them out and remeasured them. This is not my assumptions. This is science. It comes out that way. Now, what happens when you graze a cover crop? Here's another set of cores that we pulled later in the year, the blues in September. Uh-oh, it's the opposite a while ago, Jimmy. So now you have cover crop there on the left, no cover on the right. You've used more water. Why? Well, we grazed that summer cover. And once them covers go to reproductive mode while you're grazing them, they will use more water. But guess what? When we came back in February and pulled them same cores, GPS locations, now we're water ahead. Why? Because when it does rain, we retain it, we store it back, and every time I do this, I see this. And this is what's happened. Once in a while, we will graze, we'll see these lines separate, and then they'll come back together, and in the end, we still have more water. And there's 102% more versus 20, which is huge numbers. Now you look here, this is a soil pit. I'm down at one of my mentors, Alan Mendeman in Apache, Oklahoma. Greg Scott there is a soil scientist that works with me. He's in the pit. I want you to look around this pit at the berm. When we dug this, it was very short notice. We didn't smooth up anything when Alan dug this. One of the key things I want to point out is down where he's standing in the pit, that is sand rock on the bottom. So that is all the soil profile that Alan has to work with down there on this hill farm. So if you look in the background, it's starting to cloud up. Some rain clouds is moving in. We got done with the field day, and just as we were pulling out, it came a huge rain. And guess what? The soil pit, looky there, it filled up. But once again, if you look at the berm around that, there's no water running in from the outside. That all come in from the walls of the pit through the earthworm burrows, the root exudates down in there, the pathways. That Alan has a very, very porous soil. He's been doing a systems approach for about 20 years. So he has 20 inches in the profile of very rich, dark soil. And that's how the water cycle should function. So now we're at Emmons Farms this summer. This is in a field of corn. We left a blank spot out here. You see the covers that we have on the ground. This was a field of cereal rye that we harvested. And when I harvested that rye, I on purpose threw over some rye so I would reseed for this next cover crop into the corn. I actually run out of corn seed here with the planter at the very end of the field. And we wanted to do a water infiltration test with the pivot. So that's a 4-foot wagon ring that's in the ground. And we put on a little over, you see the gauge there's got about a couple inches in it at that point. We did put cameras on this. You see 2 GoPros, one on the sprinkler and one out there on the stand, trying to simulate a rainfall event. The rain gauge is now full. That's 7 inches in about an hour and 45 minutes. And if you'll notice, there's no standing water, no runoff water there, because our infiltration rate, much like Dale talked about this morning, has went from a 1/2 inch per hour 10 years ago to now we can do about 7 to 10 inches an hour. It depends on exactly where you're at in the field. But man, it has really changed. We shut the pivot off and there is no standing water. It went down 5 foot deep. We dug this ring, we split this up in half. You see the rain gauge there is completely ran over. That's a 7-inch rain gauge. So we have really changed exactly what Dale was talking about this morning. We take in all our rain. We get enough normal rainfall to do what we need to do in Dewey County, Oklahoma, except in them very extreme patterns like this summer. But once again, I still had more water to work with than the neighbors, because that ½ inch an hour, when you would get a rainfall event like this, it all runs off, or very much, or quite a bit of it. Here I am in Coffee County, Tennessee with Adam Doherty. I am standing. These are soybeans, one of the most phenomenal crops of soybeans I've ever saw in my entire life. They call this field Eden, and I believe it. I've never been to Eden, but I was in that field that day. So I bent down after we took this picture and I looked, and this is what his surface looked like. He'd had a big cereal and hairy vetch crop that he rolled down and planted into. And so I took my hand and very gently pulled that residue back, and this is what his surface looked like. Very porous. You see lots of water infiltration points there, earthworm holes. And I tell everybody, Ray Charles could see that this could take water in. I also have a device that I put on my iPad and phone that's a microscope. So I set it down on the ground, and this is what his surface truly looks like up close, magnified about 200. So you understand by looking at this, when you get a heavy rainfall event like we just done with the pivot, or we get a 4 or 5 or 6 inch rainfall event, where the water is going to go. It's going to go in. So in this field, to the side, there's no fence. So we walked over into that field. This is what his surface looks like. I'm standing in the beans. The beans are shorter. They're good beans, pocket high on me. But this is what his surface looks like with no cover crops in between. A very, very good no-till farmer, but no cover crops. Up there in the top left-hand corners where I'm going to kind of zero in, I took this snapshot. This is his surface. Now, where's the water going to go if you have a heavy rainfall event in this scenario? Yes, you're correct. It's going to go downhill. Lots of runoff, and if we sprayed anything on that, whether it be a fertilizer application or chemical application, where's that going to go? Down the road. So I set my GoPro down. I took a snapshot with my microscope, and this is what the surface looks like. No, that is not the moon. That is his surface. So that's how important a cover crop system is, and how we can retain that water when it falls. So I dug the 2 shovelfuls up. Eden's on the left. The no-till farmer with no cover crops is on the right. Look at the difference in the root mass. Look at the difference in the soil texture. When we talk about carbon retention, building soil organic matter, there it is. It's on the left. Like I said, a very good farmer on the right, but a farmer that's just not quite there yet. So everybody tells me, if you're looking at this, Jimmy, well, that's in Coffee County, Tennessee. That's 60-inch rainfall. No wonder the beans are head high, pocket high. And yeah, they can change their soil here, but you can't do it in Dewey County, Oklahoma. So I came home. My soil is on the left, across the road. That's my neighbor's soil. If you've ever heard people talk about Oklahoma red dirt, that's what he has. That's what I used to have. But now I have this really dark carbon-rich soil. We're gaining on that. And one of the most exciting things that's happened this summer is when the soil scientists come out to do the infiltration test. We dug this up. My surface used to look like that on the bottom. Now my new surface is on the top there. We have moved that down almost to the plow pan. I like about 3 inches in this field, having it back to where it used to be pre-settlement, I believe. They're going to reclassify this soil, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But just look at the difference that we've been able to change here. And how do you change that? Well, you let the earthworms work. If you look down below at that light colored there, you'll see the earthworm burrows where they're mixing that soil. They're moving that profile on down. They'll do the work for you. The biology will do the work for you. You know, reclassifying my soil. You know, this original soil survey was mapped as a eustafluvitic soil. It was very young. It typically had a very light color, no darkness to it. And that's what Steve Allspall looked at 8 years ago when he came back, and he's come back every year. We've been working on this project a long time in this field. But that's not what he saw today. What he saw in that day he was out was a molic soil, which is very carbon rich, very dark. And now he's going to reclassify that soil as a fluvitic haptosoil, which means that it's very porous, it has large aggregation in it, soil aggregates, so the water can move down through that profile very fast at a rapid rate, and we can store it where it falls and keep it till we need it. Very exciting news, and it's something that I didn't anticipate in 8 years, but we've been able to do that. And how have we done that? We've done that with covers, multiple different covers with triticale on the left, or rye on the right, and we always have other species in that. And that shovel there will show you that is our herbicide. That is how you control a weed. I've actually saw Palmer amaranth grow along the profile top of it, underneath that cover for 2 or 3 foot, trying to find a piece of sunlight to come out of the ground before it died. You keep it covered, you can control them weeds. This summer, this is that corn crop that we planted in that cereal rye. I've done this kind of on a double dare. Last 2 planted double crop corn in Dewey County because we're too dry. Even if you irrigate and you plant corn early, we get too hot to pollinate. So we want to plant a double crop scenario. If you look there on the right, you see our cereal rye is done starting to come up there, and we're going to have a good cover very shortly. If you look at these next set of pictures, you'll see that there's crabgrass, cereal rye in that middle picture. A little further down the road here, and you'll see that, yeah, we do have some Jimmy red corn this year, and I believe that's some Tommy Boy in the middle there. This corn crop had no synthetic nitrogen put on it. It only had some compost tea extracts and some molasses and humics and some amenities over the top for the biological activity. Here's a picture after we harvested. We're grazing that right now with yearling cattle, and what a great grazing program of corn stalks and cereal rye, and them cattle are turning the crank, as we would say here in western Oklahoma. We've got very diverse, as Cindy said, with our cropping systems, but we do graze them summer covers, and we either will use, these are a set of first calf heifers that needed a boost here in the summer. 103 degrees. We've been about 40 days without rain.
Jimmy, you're breaking up just a little. Can you sit closer to the?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
So that's me talking on the video there. It's been 40 days since rain, but that summer cover really looks good. Here we are. Everybody says, well, fencing is too hard. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We're set up on this four-wheeler. Very simple system. Keeps the poly wire tight. I just step side saddle off, 1 foot on the ground, post in, hook it up, and away we go. Now, you're saying, well, you mowed a strip there, Jimmy. Well, my wife prefers that when I'm gone away from home. She can see where the fence is and it's up. I don't do that. I'm going to show you in the next clip or two here. What I've done, instead of taking the tractor around now when these covers get too big and short the fence out, this is what I do. This cover here is about pocket high. I found if you'll drag an old truck tire, works very good, very fast. You can pull that up on the trailer with you, throw it up on the pickup, and away you go. So it's a pretty good way to do that. You get that down on the ground as well. This just kind of show you a little bit about the rig. Keep my post in the baskets. There's the reel, the tire, and I can do that really fast. How have I learned to do this? Forming partnerships to learn. There's my state conservationist, Gary O'Neill, on the ground. There's the other NRCS team. My state soil scientist has worked with me a lot. This is Greg Scott. Steve Osbald works now, took Greg's place. Here on the right is Noble Research. I talked about Alan Mindeman there in the yellow shirt, one of my mentors. Oklahoma State University there in the orange. And also my crop consultant, used to be my fertilizer salesman and chemical rep there in the white, now is really on board trying to help me grow the biological activity. And it's been a very good journey with him. John Deere. Why would John Deere be at my place? This is one of our box drills that we use for plot work. There's the block and tackle guy there on the right, my salesman next to him. The two guys on the left are working on equipment 15 years into the future. They're seeing what high residue, how we can change these drills, listening to our recommendations and inputs. And I wished I could tell you what's coming in 15 years, but if you'll hang around, I think you're going to be pretty pleased with that. Ray Archuleta, Willie Durham, soil health experts in the field. We also do plant identification. You got to understand what you're planting, why you're planting it. We want 2 or 3 outcomes for each seed we put in there. So Keith Burns, the green cover seeds there, is helping us with Jim Johnson and Noble Research, identifying each plant in this diverse mix and telling what it's providing for the mix. Traveling. That's you need to go see other experts in the field. Here I am with Rick Bieber. I know a lot of you in South Dakota know Rick. Been to his place. Jay Fuhr up at Bismarck. Like I said, Jay's been down to my farm. This is at the Minokan farm a couple of years ago. Gabe Brown. Gabe and I are good friends, have traveled quite a bit together. I went up to visit Gabe and see his operation. I also went to see Darren Williams. There's Keith Burns in front of me here as well. That's how you learn, getting to see everybody. Dr. Beck, I can't say enough about Dr. Beck and Dakota Lakes and what he's been able to help me do and understand. And I know the impact that he's made in South Dakota. Adam Doherty in Tennessee. And then we get to this picture. You've got to understand under the ground how things work. And here we have an Elbon rye root growing from left to right through an earthworm burrow. And when I took this original photograph, I said, man, look at the droplets on them root hairs. What is that? Well, that is root exudates. Everybody talks about it, but have you ever seen it? No, you wouldn't see it because it would be surrounded in soil. So this is what's leaking out of the root to feed the biology. And if I would have took this to the house and put it under the microscope, I would have had a dynamic, crazy, crazy picture that we would all been in awe of, but I don't always think of everything. So a very good photograph. You know, fungi, it's very important. This is, once again, I use this tool on the phone at all times, learning what's below the ground, pot worms that you can see through, and as see the material pass down through them is just a very eye-opener. And Dr. Buzz Clute, sometimes it's just overwhelming, the life below ground. We know so much to know so little. And how true is that? How true is that? But we are learning at a rapid pace of what we can really do. Here's a good friend of mine, Russ Jackson, south of me about 60 miles. He had a 5.3 inch rainfall. Russ and I started working together about 5 years ago, I guess now. That's his place on the left. His neighbor, heavy tillage addict, on the right. If you look at the numbers here in the management system, Russ tuck in, and we had measured this with water infiltration a week before this rain event of 6 inches an hour. And when Russ called me that morning and sharing this picture, he said, Jimmy, I took it all in. I said, well, yeah, if it only rained 5.3 inches, you've got a 6 inch an hour rate. So yes, he stored about 143, almost 144,000 gallons of water. His neighbor at a half an inch an hour rate only took in 16,500 gallons. What's the difference in these two pictures? If you look on the left there, it's greener here. This is 2 weeks after the initial picture, another big rainfall event. Once again, Russ took in all the water. His neighbor did not. So as soon as Russ sent me this picture that morning, I hopped in the pickup, drove down there, was there really the next morning. And this is what I saw. Water still running out of the field. The water is running down this roadway, going through that tin horn in front of the neighbor's house. Russ's dad lives on the left there, and then that's going to the river. So where's his nutrients? Where's his soil going? You got it, down the ditch. Look at his surface out there. He will not take in a half inch an hour now if that rains tonight or this afternoon. If you look at the bar ditch here, look how muddy it is. That is soil leaving. That is nutrients leaving. That is organic matter, everything that we need. And that's the reason that Jimmy is no longer a tillage addict. I see things in a totally different light now. Russ next door has grazed this cover crop and letting it come back. He's going to go to cotton with this field, and he raised a one heck of a cotton crop there. Because why? He stored all the rain when it rained, and his neighbor shed all the water, just like Dale talked about this morning. So I don't know how many of you are a Westerns fan. You know, you can tell by my hat. I am kind of a cowboy. I love the range. I love to ride. Nowadays, we may ride a Ranger more than a horse. But how would you stop a runaway stagecoach? You know, we've seen this in the Western movies for years, and this is how they done it. John Wayne would have jumped from A to B to C to D to E to F out here and saved the damsel in distress. You know, that's the way he's always done it. That's the way that I've seen it done hundreds of times. But is there another way? Yes, there is. My point being here, we don't have to do it the way we've always done it. I'm sure that John Ford and John Wayne never sat around and said, hey, Duke, I wonder, instead of you jumping from that horse, from that stage to that horse to the next horse to the front team, you know, and you may fall and you may get hurt, it may cost us much. Why don't you just pull out your 45 and shoot them and stop? I'm sure they didn't talk about that scenario. Why? Because they'd always done what they'd done. and they wanted to sell an audience that story, and it was very easy. They were very used to it. But, you know, there's two different methods. I've chosen an alternative method at Emmons Farms. You know, sometimes we carry the answer with us, but we're just not willing to look in the right places to solve the problem. You know, we have done a tremendous job since the dirty 30s of diverting resources, whether it be building terraces to divert the water out of the field. Dale talked about shelter belts. They're great, but we tried to divert the wind when really we just needed to keep things covered, keep that good tall residue on the field out there, but we didn't. I'm going to kind of end there, and that is a photograph of a corner post on Emmons Farms. I kind of laugh and tell everybody I drove by this post a dozen times before I stopped one day, and I thought, there it is. There's no tillage. There's no chemical inputs. Mother Nature said, I want something to grow, and there's the habitat. And so I tell everybody, when you get your system right, even you can grow things on your corner post. So here's how you can get a hold of me. And Cindy, I really appreciate it. I think I'm pretty close on time here. So I'd probably entertain a few questions if you have some.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jimmy. You did an excellent job, and we're very thankful to get to hear your story. And even though you weren't able to join us in South Dakota, we're going to bring you up here sometime soon, hopefully. So yeah, we have a long list of questions, so I'm going to get right to them, and hopefully you can share a little more insight for some of the people in attendance here. So one of them, when I see this question, I'm interested to hear what you say too. So how can we distinguish, or what are your thoughts between the difference between soil quality and soil health? What do you think is there a difference? Do you think it's the same?
Well, yeah, I think there is a difference. There is different qualities of soil. I have that in my fields. It ranges very dramatically from one location to the other. Whether it's been silted in or eroded away, or just difference in the soil types. Soil health means how that soil is functioning, how much life you have in it. And so I think it's very different. You can have a different quality of soil that's dead, that's not going to perform the same as a healthy soil right beside it, and have the same qualities in it, but it's void of life, and life is very important. So yeah, I think there's a big difference.
Okay. Discuss your aha moment. We like to say that a lot. When you decided to change from the tillage management.
You know, and I wished I'd had that in the presentation today, but only an hour, you can't get it all in there. The first year and the second year, I left about 6 by 6 square plots in the field around cover. So we would either raise a drill up or go around and leave a spot, or we would come back and pull that up and do away with the cover to simulate what the neighbors was doing. In the spring, following that summer cover crop, we planted cereal. Well, I believe that year it was winter wheat. And Noble Research came out one day, and that was in February, and you could see them square plots hundreds of feet from them. And the wheat wasn't near as good, and that was during the drought years of 11 and 12 and early 13. And so Jim and I walked out there, and he said, I wonder what's going on here. And I always kidded Jim, well, you're the researcher and the agronomist and the expert here, you tell me. And so he went back to the pickup and got a soil probe. Mm-hmm. And in that square where there's no covers, he could only get down about 16 inches, and it was just a hard pan. The probe wouldn't go in. We moved over into where the covers was and went 33 inches all the way to the T-handle. And he said, wow, what is this? So then we called NRCS. They brought a Giddings probe out. What he was hitting was a dry layer. Mm-hmm. So we had not stored water there like I was talking about. where there was no covers, and where we had covers, we had stored that water, and we had 32 inches plus in the profile versus 16. That was a huge, huge aha moment for me, and I knew we were on the right track. And as I tell everybody, I never look back.
Right. That seeing is believing. That's what I've always said too. So,
Very true.
all right. Yeah. Another question is, tell us about soil microbes and who, or I bet it's supposed to be how functions during the winter months on perennial forages.
So it depends on your winter months and where you're at. There's a huge difference from where you're setting today and where I'm setting.
Exactly.
Most years, I have the ability to grow 365.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody up north has that ability, but just because of the harshness of the winter. So our biological worlds are the same, but they're very different. Much like humans up there in the wintertime, everybody kind of shuts down their activity due to the winter months. That's the way the biology kind of goes dormant. If you have a very vibrant profile and a very active soil, they can work and will work even in harsh conditions once you get enough in the house. And it's very important to understand that. You take a dead soil, it's like a gymnasium that's been sitting vacant all winter. If you go inside that, it's very cold, it's very calm, it's very quiet. If you go into a gymnasium where they're doing a practice session with basketball and there's only the players and the coach there, it's warmer, it's more active, but the stands are empty. If you put a tournaments going on and the fire marshal comes and says you can't put one more person in here, you're past capacity, normally they have to turn the fans on in that building because there's too much heat going on from all the bodies in there. It's the same way in the soil profile. If you get to a tournament size biological world, it will create enough heat that they can be alive in very cold temperatures. We've actually seen earthworms here in 28-degree weather working in the top 3 inches of the profile, but my soil is very warm. And so there is a lot of difference in where you're at. And the further south you go, the harder the challenges are because that biological activity is so active that you've got to grow a lot more to feed it. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, great. Derek Axton was here last year, who lives in Canada, and talked a little bit about that. So appreciate those comments here. We got another one about tillage, and what is your opinion on how long it takes for the effects of tillage to go away?
Well, once again, it depends on. It took me a while because once again I was a little skeptical the first year or two, and once again I did a little tillage, screwed up early. Really about 3 to 5 years. There's changes starts happening the first and second and third year, but they're minute, and this thing in between my ears is your biggest challenge, and how you think and how you look at what's happening, and that's what I've learned more in the last 5 or 6 years is really how to look at what's going on. Mother Nature will tell you the job you're doing, and I talked about in that soil profile a while ago. I have degraded that profile as deep as my granddad and I could plow. Of course, I plowed deeper than granddad did because I had more horsepower. I degraded at a more rapid rate than he did. My dad was more than him. But once again, the quicker you get into the system, the quicker you can do all that total system with animals. And you can do it with any animal. I just happen to be a cattleman, but you can do it with sheep, you can do it with goats, you can do it with pigs, you can do it with all of it. like a lot of people are doing. But that's them effects of tillage will go away quicker the bigger the diverse the system is. But 3 to 5 years.
Okay. Are you able to translate soil health practices to your bottom line in specific numbers? We all know that they make good sense, economic sense. Just wondering if you've been able to push a pencil to it. And I know Nick Jorgensen is going to speak tomorrow, and he's an economist, and he'll talk a little bit about that. But what do you think about the economics of it, Jimmy?
Well, I reduced my fuel cost $100,000 a year. I don't know about anybody else. That's significant, you know. Of course, $100,000 today is not what it was, 20 years ago. $100,000 would have been a lot of money. Today, it'll still buy you a new pickup or a part of a quarter of a land. But just them reduce in inputs, it is dramatic. So yeah, I put a pencil to it, and plus the diversity of crops we're growing now. You spread your risk out, and you also take advantage of markets. I grow a lot of cover crop seed now. There's a huge demand for cover crop seed. I don't always have to grow a commodity crop anymore. I'm growing sesame that's going directly to McDonald's for sesame seed buns. They approached me for that because they want it grown in a regenerative system, and that pays very well. So all that really adds to the bottom line. And plus, like I said, animals. Most every time I graze a summer forage cover crop, I can almost put $100 bill per acre in my pocket, and give or take.
Yeah. So could you tell us where your soil organic matter percentage was and where it is now? Do you have those numbers? Okay.
So in that very first field where I showed you when we started, there were places in that field it was 0.4% of
Wow.
And the highest in that was in 2010. The highest was like just over 0.5%.
Okay.
Today, this summer, a lot of that field is 3%, and even them 0.4 of places are about 1 to 1.5 now. So if you really look at that, and I now can store about 25 to 40,000 gallons more water today than I could have in the beginning, and that's what that organic matter and that aggregation can do for you. So it's I just very seldom I use my irrigation pivots now to supplement the rainfall when it doesn't happen. So instead of full tilt like I used to be.
Right. How are you convincing people who think agriculture is the problem that agriculture is actually a big part of the solution?
Yeah, I mean, that is so true. We can be the problem or we can be the solution. And just like that slide I showed of Russ Jackson and his neighbor, Russ is becoming the solution. His neighbor is the problem. So when we talk about the Gulf of Mexico, we are causing them issues. We are causing on the Missouri River, we are causing them issues with sediment and nutrient loading from erosion. But we can be the solution. We can stop that. And them streams will get clearer. The fish will do better. And so how do I convince people of that? Hopefully by just showing them what we can do. I've got a great slide from back east in Pennsylvania. They were doing really, really well in the Chesapeake Bay area over the past several years, and had really almost stopped the erosion going in and sediment going into the bay. And then organic come along, and organic is great. Organic's great. I want to say that up front. But there was a mentality that if I can't spray a herbicide, I need to till that to kill that weed. And so they started the tilling in their organic fields, not doing the no-till organic like Dale showed you earlier this morning.
Yeah.
And the erosion in a big rainfall event, you could see that sediment rushing out and the color difference in the bay. Since then, now there are several of them have got back to trying to do a no-till organic. But that's how drastically we can become the problem or the solution. And so it's just sharing. Mm-hmm. And like you said earlier, it's seeing's believing, and seeing it on your own land, in front of you, it is the sure sign. I mean, everybody wants to say, well, I can't do that here. Can't, that's, you can only do it there. And David Montgomery, a great author. David has changed so much once he saw what happened in his garden, in his backyard. Yep. And I told David that, and he said, "Yes, you're right. I saw it on Gabe Brown's farm. I saw it on your farm, but it's different when you see it on your own place."
Yeah. Yeah. We had David in South Dakota with the South Dakota Association of Conservation Districts, and he did a great job.
Oh yeah. Good friend.
Yeah. So it says, please discuss or show photos of biostimulants, the humic acid strips, and the root rhizole sheets. So I don't know if you have those available, but if you want to just talk a little bit about the biostimulants, the humic acid.
Yeah. So what we've really learned in the past few years is what you can do with a biostimulant or a housing. Humic acid is really a house that you can provide your biology. You're not really providing the per se biology to the ground, but you're providing the carbon and the house that they can use themselves. And so when you put that on a seed, and when that first germ comes out, it has what it needs right there. And so we use several different things, a compost tea extract, vermicompost, humics, molasses, right on the seed as a seed treatment. And when you do that, and that plant becomes so vibrant in the very, very first hours and days of its growth, then you see that biological activity working on them roots, feeding, and that rhizole sheeting starts happening. And that's the big difference, that once that system and you have that activity growing, you can just enhance that. Now, there is a big debate whether if I done that on Gabe Brown's farm or Rick Bieber's farm or Dan Forgey's farm, will you see as much difference as you would on a highly degraded? No, you're not going to see that much. And eventually we won't have to, I don't think, have to do that. Mm-hmm. But it's still for pennies an acre, we can make a tremendous difference. And that's been our ability to lessen our synthetic input needs, because once you enhance the biological activity, they can mineralize the nutrients that you have there. And so I think it's very important. And I guess I maybe should have spent a little more time on them photographs in the presentation of the difference in how that rhizole sheeting had taken place through the progression of the last several years on my farm.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No problem. I think that's been great. So another question is what, we talked a little bit how the benefits of agriculture, we can be the solutions for agriculture too. They also want to know about what your thoughts are for soil health with the wildlife, and what benefits of the practices actually help out on your operation. You probably have some quail. Is that
oh yeah. And I'll relate this in landlord terms. I rented a farm, and the older gentleman has passed on now, and his children have it. But when I first started this, he's like, "Jimmy, I believe in what you're doing, but man, I don't know. This don't look as pretty as what I've been used to." And I said, "Leroy, if you'll just give me a little bit, I think you and the family are really going to enjoy it, because where I've been doing this, the wildlife really come alive, and they're very avid duck hunters, quail hunters, turkey hunters, and deer hunters. And about the third year in, he said, I don't know, I don't understand what you're doing, but you keep it up, bud, because we've killed our limit in quail. We got hundreds of turkeys, and it really, it's almost like the movie, build it and they will come. And once again, you're providing the habitat.
Mhm.
And what we've done with quail, bobwhite quail here in Oklahoma, was almost extinct. I mean, we just never hunted for years because they were just a handful. We had took the habitat away. And so now where we have something growing and we have all these multiple species and small seeds and more water availability, the wildlife has really come back, and we have elk now that's migrated down the river, and so we have a big 8x8 bull elk that is the biggest bull elk I've saw, and I've hunted in the mountains for years,
Yeah.
and now I have him on my farm. So
Really, I think it was Tom Cannon last year had mentioned the deer. I believe it was him and his son were talking about the increase in the wildlife when they started implementing the different practices. So
the only thing that I've attracted that I wished I hadn't was the feral pigs. They're a huge problem that we're trying to work on, and they
can do some damage quick.
They can do a lot of damage.
Yeah. So these questions are great. So please continue to put them in the Whova question and answer, and we'll try to get to as many as we can here. Let Jimmy catch a drink of water. And I have a good one here for the young producers that are on, starting out with limited financial resources. They're worried, how do you get your financial institution on board? I know I've heard that a lot when a young producer says, I want to spend this amount to go get some cover crop seed. And I'm not going to harvest it, I'm going to utilize it. And they don't understand. So have you had any experience in working with financial institutions, Jimmy?
Yeah, I have. So one of the key things is my banker is also a farmer. And so when I started inviting him to come to field days, first of all, to be a sponsor for lunch and stuff, but second of all, to educate him. And since then, he's done it on his farm. He's had customers that he's said, Jimmy, can you help these guys? Very tough cash flow. Your cash flow is positive. Can you help them? And so I really truly believe that that's where we really need to do some education and invite our bankers and farm credits and the commercial banks and out to the farm to help educate them more. They need to learn like we learned and everybody else. And so that was an easy for me. I wasn't doing it the first time or two. I was just doing it for financial to help feed everybody, because about the second or third field day we had 150 to 200 people show up. Yeah. And so it was a challenge, but it turned out that I was educating the banker. And so now we try to invite all the banks around to field days and try to get them involved. And I think that's a real key, that it, once again, seeing's believing, whether it's your financial statement or seeing it out in the field.
Right. Yeah. I know the coalition, the directors, that's one thing they're hoping to continue with. We invite the different egg lenders, and some of those, we had specific tours for people that are in that egg lend industry, and try to help them understand why the importance of creating that healthy system is going to actually be better for their bottom line. You're going to impact your economics a lot more.
One of the things that we done when I was president of the conservation districts, we started putting on a legislator tour where we'd bring our state legislature, House members and Senate members out and do that one-on-one tour that try to get them involved, to try to put some money into soil health practices and to understand, we can be the solution instead of the problem.
Right. Yeah, that's very important. Another good question is you talked about how at your place you can grow something, 365 days out of the year. Are there any drawbacks, is their question, to a production cycle where it is continually growing?
So there, I tell everybody, if it never rains, it doesn't matter. And this past summer, we did use some water that kind of hurt us in the fall. But once again, in the end, when it comes spring, I'm going to be water ahead because of that ability to capture what comes when it does come. But there is a challenge, and it's also a management challenge as well, trying to figure out, all right, they're predicting a La Nina season, warmer, drier winters. What kind of cover do I need to plant that will be more water efficient? And same way in the summertime, we really try to focus in on water efficiency of the cover crop species. And when I talked about that a while ago, about 3 different outcomes for each seed, I want something that will have a different colored flower on it that will help benefit insects, whether it be attracting beneficials or whatnot. I want that to be able to provide either free up some nutrients in the ground, whether that be a buckwheat that would leak some acid in the soil to help dissolve some phosphorus, make it available, or it be a legume. But I want that to shade, be a good long-lasting residue. So when I'm trying to select them species for the mix, I try to have that in my mind, 2 or 3 good positive things for each plant.
Another good question here is, do you ever have a problem finding a market for any of those diverse crops?
Marketing it is a big thing, and it's probably one of the bigger challenges that we face across America, because once again, we're kind of elevator addicts. We're used to just hauling the commodity to the local elevator. Now, up where y'all are at, that has changed over the last 20 years a bunch. I see a lot more farm storage up there than we have here. But yeah, sunflowers. When I started growing sunflowers here, I had to haul them quite a ways to have a market, and but I was still able to make that work with backhauls and whatnot. And one day, a friend of mine in Kentucky was asking, what we were doing, and I said, "Well, getting ready to try to ship some sunflowers." And he said, "Sunflowers? You have sunflowers?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You have some for sale?" I said, "Well, yeah, Rick, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, I work for Feeder Supply, which we have 40 stores in the Louisville area. And we buy sunflowers, we buy millet seeds for bird and squirrel feed. And it doubled my profit on the sunflowers overnight. And so they were bringing wood shavings out. They backhaul sunflowers back in. So sometimes it's just having the ability to be open and networking around and just looking for markets. I was at a field day in western Kansas, and I was in the field and was talking about different crops, and that exact question come up and said, "Well, we live out here and it's X 100 miles to here and 150 miles to here, and all we have a market for is corn and beans and some wheat." And I said, "Really?" And I turned around, and across the road from where I was standing is the largest dairy in the world going in. It's huge. It's just 2 sections. Wow. And I said, "What about right there?" I said, "They're going to need, all these forages, all these grains, oils." And I named off quickly about 10 or 12 crops that they could raise. And he said, "Well, I never thought of that." And it was right across the road.
Right.
And so, once again, say what?
I said, and the quality of the feed for the dairy is so important. So if you have a healthy system, that's what they want. They want that quality in order to have the quality feed to get the quality milk. So that's great.
And one of the new tools that we're using is this Grain Sense, and it's a tool that you can do pre-harvest or while you're harvesting. You can sprinkle a few grains on this, close it up, and immediately it'll tell you not only the moisture, it'll tell you, like on beans, the oil content, the protein, the carbohydrates, and about 10 or 12 different things. And so we bin things according to quality, and then we capture them premiums by segregating that as we're harvesting. So the new technologies coming on that will allow us better market opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's very true. We have a few more great questions here I want to get to. One is specifically about your cover crop mix. They looked really great, they said. How do you decide what you use? And do you have a set one that you always use?
Well, so I do have a standard summer mix. We call a Western soil mix now. But I always throw something extra in that every year to see what will help enhance that. So I like to have that carbon to nitrogen ratio about 22 to 26. It depends on what I've grown previously. If I need higher carbon, I'll bump up the grasses and whatnot, and try to help balance that out. And I'll juggle with that back and forth. And we always try something new every year by, a different mix. I've tried 30, I've tried 40 way mixes to see, if there was a big benefit versus my standard 15 to 20. And once again, it gets down to your goals and what you want to accomplish. But like I said earlier, I tried each one of them varieties in that 18 to 20 way mix that we're using now. I want them benefits. So I want a white flower or a purple flower where it be a flax. I want a yellow flower where sunflowers, because all these different insects and beneficials, pollinators, are attracted by different scents and different looks as they fly over. And so we want all that diversity in there. And then, like I said, I want the ability to add to my soil, where it be a deep-rooted crop or a very hairy, dense root system in the ground. So all that has to play in. I do have the standard mix, but I do tweak with that every year, and I think that's how we learn. And everything I plant doesn't always work. I mean, and that's Rick Bieber will tell you that the more you use, the less risk of failure is, because you have so much diversity out there. And there's a lot of truth to that.
Right. Yeah, this is a great question. I know you were president of your conservation district, your state association even. I was down there when you were presenting at the National Range Contest. But this one you talk a lot about soil health. They said, how much do you take into consideration your water quality and your watershed issues related to agriculture, such as the irrigation, you spoke on that, and the runoff. So if you want to address that a little bit before we have to end.
Sure. So and Dale touched on this, and it is the holy grail. It's water infiltration. You need to know what your water infiltration rate is on your farm. If you do not know that, that's one of the first things you need to know, because if that is part of the learning tool to get you to the next level. And once you get up where you can take 8, 10, 12 inches an hour, then your water erosion runoff problem literally goes away. There are extreme cases where, like in these hurricane areas where you get 15, 20, 30 inches, there's no way the profile can hold that. But in normal situations, we can hold everything that falls if we do a good job. And when you do that, then your water quality downstream is improved so much. And we done a great job with the districts. We had a 319 project with EPA. And so we had stream monitors. The water supply that goes to Oklahoma City is about a 35-mile river span from one dam to the water source in Oklahoma City. And we took that money and we incentivized farmers and ranchers to start no-till, put buffer strips in, riparian areas. And within 3 years, we got that stream pulled off the 303 list, delisting, and the water quality, the turbidity, and the nutrients and the bacteria all went away, except where it went through a couple of urban areas, and we were seeing storm drainage runoff, and it really helped them communities understand that they were part of the problem, and it wasn't all ag. So it was a very good learning tool for everybody, but that just shows you what you can do in a short period of time for water quality and quantity.
Right. Yeah. That urban green area is so important too, if
Mm-hmm.
they're doing that. So, well, it is 2:00. So I want to thank you again, Jimmy. The presentation was great. I want to let everyone know that Jimmy will be back with us this evening. Him and Lauren and some of the directors will do some live panel discussion. Excellent. So if I didn't get to your question, make sure you type it in there. We'll get to it tonight. And the
famous Lauren.
That's right. Yep. We're going to learn more about cover crops and how to work with what we have and improve our soil health too. So I look forward to it. So I'm going to ask Sarah to come on, and we got to do our drawing. So thank you again, Jimmy. If you want any other questions for him, like I said, don't hesitate to jot them down. We will get to them this evening. Sarah's going to do a drawing. We have our soil health school we should do it in September, August timeframe, and we're going to give a drawing away for free registration for that. So anyone that is registered for this event will have an opportunity to win that. And,
here we go.
All right.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Rebecca. So we will be in touch with you and get you registered, and hopefully we'll do another one. Yeah, another one again. So I just want to kind of do the morning wrap up here. Thank everyone for tuning in. It's been an interesting preparing for a virtual event rather than our real events that we've had the last few years, but we've had excellent speakers, and this evening is not going to change, or tomorrow. So hopefully everyone will tune in again. Gives you an opportunity for a little break here. Tune back in a little before 6. So we'll start right at 6 with Darla Tyler McSherry, and we'll have our producer panel, like I said, but you continue on Whova if you would like. You can schedule your own meetups with anyone in attendance. Check out our exhibitors or sponsors. I want to thank them all for helping us put this event on. And again, thank the speakers. The directors will be on as well. You'll get to meet all the directors. So we are thanking you for being a part of our event. Hopefully you have certain things jotted down and able to take something away. That's the one thing about soil health, you're always learning. So thank you again, Jimmy. You did an excellent job. I know it's really hard when you're sitting there doing it in front of your computer and talking for that long. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all, and thanks for the invitation. And don't forget to see the famous Lauren Steinlage later today and tomorrow.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. We have some excellent panel. The speakers, Lauren and Jimmy, will do an excellent job. We'll throw in a few of the directors if they're able to join us, and I think we'll have just a great discussion back and forth. So, and tomorrow the lineup is excellent lineup as well. So check out the agenda. Make sure you mark that on. Use the Whova, like I said. There's networking opportunities. Go into the networking room. Like us on Facebook. Do the Twitter, so we can definitely, and don't forget to post your pictures. Jimmy and Lauren are gonna judge for us, so post your pictures, and we will see everyone later tonight. Remember to log in before 6 so we can be starting right at 6. We will see everyone later. Thank you.
Don't miss Nick too. I'm looking forward to Nick.
Yeah, Nick will be he's got an excellent, he's going to talk a little bit about his new vents that he's been doing and his economics. His presentation is always exciting. So we will talk to you again. Thank you.